I also want to make mention of John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now. This is a very interesting edition that we cover this week. Of course, each week on the show, we review the original broadcasts of John's groundbreaking wrestling radio show, Pro Wrestling Spotlight, playing clips, discussing what was happening behind the scenes of the show, behind the scenes of professional wrestling, who were John's sources, some really interesting stuff. But this is the week where John gets the angriest that he's ever been on the air up to this point. May 20th, 1990, the day after Capital Combat 90. I want to play a clip, if you don't mind, Jim, because in 1989, when Pro Wrestling Spotlight started, John was a champion for the NWA. He loved what they were doing. This is Flair Steamboat into Flair Funk, even though some people who eventually ended up on the booking committee may say, well, 1989 had its problems too. It was, for lack of a better term, the glory days for so many fans watching TBS wrestling. Everything went to hell by the spring of 1990. This promotion that was so serious and was the NWA We Wrestle and had Ric Flair and all these talented guys like the Great Muta and Terry Funk and Sting and Luger. Go watch 1989 Lex Luger. Go watch 1990 Lex Luger. He was phenomenal. Greatest tag teams, the Midnight Express, the Road Warriors. Everything went to hell in a handbasket. Just like that. 2 words for you. Jim Herd. Another 2 words for you. Ole Anderson as the booker.
And several more words for you. By the end of the year, it was toast.
Again, I want to play this clip for you. This is just a small section of something we review on this week's show, available at pwspod.com, or look for John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now, wherever you find your favorite podcast. But this is one of several segments where John is just incredulous at what took place the night before. This was a guy who loved the NWA, did bus trips to New Haven to see the NWA. Here's John Arezzi and Don Leibel talking a little bit about the previous night's Capital Combat.
Don Leibel.
Hello, John. Hello, wrestling public in New York City and vicinity.
Hey, you gonna start that Robocop fan club?
Well, let me tell you something. I'll be the first one to start a collection up to get a can opener and do a number on that guy.
Yeah, he definitely needs to be opened up with a can opener because he is the reason Lex Luger doesn't have that belt today. That sorry state of a half-man, half-robot.
This was the man that was supposed to be the show revolving around the protector. When Sting was getting it at the end of the match from the Four Horsemen, Lex Luger was getting...
and who comes out? They have Andre the Giant, who lost 100 pounds. He comes out.
John, I think Robocop...
What do they call this guy? El Gigante.
Huh?
Boy, he really got involved at the end of that match. He was really slugging it out with who? He was standing there. He's supposed to be another big protector. He's 7 foot 7 inches tall. He just stands there, and he doesn't do anything.
John, he makes Andre the Giant look like Bob Backlund.
Sid Vicious looks like Skylar Low next to him.
I think El Gigante ought to drive a cab somewhere in Canada. I really do.
Man.
Seriously, though, John, I was...
Seriously? I'm not serious today.
I was a bit disappointed last night. I thought for sure...
I'm irate.
With Robocop supposedly there, I thought Luger, how many times is the wrestling public supposed to see the same match and expect something different to happen? Well, it just hasn't happened.
Luger's not going to be the champion. That's the only assumption I can make.
I think so, along those lines as well.
Oh! The microphone just collapsed. I think Jim Herd just sent a message to me to keep my mouth shut. Hold on a second, Don. We'll fix it up in a minute here.
They're back.
It could be Robocop with his laser beam.
John, one remark that Jim Herd made last night that...
and Connie Chung?
Exactly. That it's still bothering me. When he had said... in reference to his new creation, LG.
Oh, yeah, I know exactly what you're going to say.
He said, well, he stepped over the top rope. That's
enough for me. Yeah, right.
Well,
they spent $300,000 on what? Getting this guy ready for what?
See, now,
for him to stand there?
If you would have been practicing to step over ropes, you could have made $300,000.
Man, I'm telling you.
That's just a small sample.
Wait a minute. I got to hold on. That brought something up that I got to say something about. And also, by the way, one thing is I love John's shows, but the old cassette tapes from 30 years ago make everybody sound like the Chipmunks. That was an actual quote from Jim Herd on I can't remember what the name of the program was Connie Chung did, but it was one of the news magazine shows on network television. And it was a similarly embarrassing appearance to when they were quoted in the New York Times as saying, we're changing the scripts on our new wrestling promotion. He just did not have any business doing media. But El Gigante, Jorge Gonzalez, they'd signed to potentially play for the Hawks because he was 7'7". Even though he played basketball in Argentina, apparently it's a whole different world here. Some of the modern outlaw mud show wrestlers find that out when they get to the big leagues. And he couldn't play for the Hawks, but they had him here and they had money in him. So they've signed him to the fucking wrestling company and tried to make a wrestler out of him and debuted him pretty much as he was starting training from scratch. Debuted him on television. Because I walked into the South Tower to go to a meeting one day with Jim Ross, and he looked over at the Omni Hotel lobby. He says, there's our new giant. And there the guy was sitting there in the lobby. And we announced him shortly thereafterwards. He'd never had a goddamn wrestling lesson. But Hurd said in defense of signing this guy for a 2-year contract, blah, blah, blah. Well, he stepped over the top rope, and that was good enough for me. So that means if he'd got one of the stilt walkers from the goddamn circus to come in and step over the top rope, he could have been fucking signed as a wrestler for WCW.
Yeah, and again,
what a fucking idiot.
To John's anger about this, and I watched it as a 10-year-old, and I started losing interest in the NWA around this period of time, which I was 10. I was, you would think if the fans like John are losing interest, at least the kids will stay entertained. They built this whole show around Robocop. Capital Combat 90, the return of Robocop. He's in the commercials with Sting. He's in the posters with Sting. He comes out to get Sting out of the gimmick cage that you were in previously.
Yeah.
And then he disappears. He's not there for the rest of the show.
Well,
and the Horsemen run wild on Sting.
I've told this story before, but I might as well, since it's all here together in the same place. In the fucking booking meetings, I was still on creative when that was planned, right? Because it took a while to come to fruition. I was off by the time they did it, but Hurd came to us, and basically this was not up for debate or discussion. Robocop was going to be on this fucking pay-per-view, and the pay-per-view is going to be called The Return of Robocop. And I said, what if somebody sees that on the TV listing? They're going to think it's a fucking sequel to the movie. What says wrestling about this? And the poster had Robocop on it. What says wrestling about this? But besides that, he gave us because Turner Home Entertainment was in the release of the video of the movie or whatever. There was an incestuous relationship. But the instructions they gave us as the booking team, once that we were told we had to use this guy and that the show was going to be themed around him, also, he can't go upstairs or downstairs in the costume. He especially can't really, the ramp can't be very steep. He can't be knocked off his feet because if he is, he will not be able to regain them. He won't be able to get back up. He was like almost immobile in the fucking suit. So I'm so glad that it was Oldie's problem by the time that came to it, because right after, I think Flair had just quit. I don't even think Flair ever heard this pitch. I think Flair had just quit. I was there, another 3 or 4 weeks, and they announced this to all of us, and then I was gone from the booking team after I resigned, and then they went to a committee during April, and by May it was Ole's problem. So Ole Anderson, bless him, that was an irony, had to go down as the only booker in fucking history to book Robocop. Good Lord.
And I have to say, the other interesting thing about this episode that we review, and we play a lot of the phone calls, and you can hear them all on Patreon, but we play on the podcast a lot of the phone calls, a lot of really frustrated fans with the NWA, and it's a lot of the complaints that you would have heard towards the last 1.5 to 2 years of Dusty's booking reign, in that we have no faith in a match ending without chaos with the Horsemen. People lost faith in the NWA because they were ready to see Luger win the title. And I understand Flair didn't want to do it. Yeah. But it wasn't just that he didn't win.
But now don't say that he didn't want to do it because he had promised it to Sting. He wanted to wait for Sting. It wasn't that he didn't want to do a job. He wanted to do a job for the other guy. So there's elements.
He didn't want to do it for Luger then.
But still, since they had to do that, they should have gone all the way with it. In hindsight, yes, you are correct.
But instead, they had the Horsemen come out, Ole Anderson with a remote control to get the cage, I think previously used to Halloween Havoc, to go up and down so the Horsemen could sneak in and get involved. And that's the other interesting thing. It's John losing it at a promotion he was really behind a year earlier. And
well, remember, by Halloween Havoc that year, they had fucking Barry Windham shave his hair down in a crew cut and come out as a fake Sting.
Yep.
And then the Black Scorpion came around, and it just fell apart. You know, that was 30 years ago, and I'm just wondering, well, how old is Cody?
He's 30-something.
This would be the first wrestling that he would be seeing that he actually has a memory of.
Well, no, it's even worse, because when Dusty took over the book in 91, that was the year of Oz and Big Josh and We Want Flair, because Flair walks out with the belt. That was maybe the single worst year.
But in all honesty, most of that wasn't Dusty's fault, just like fucking Robocop wasn't Ole's fault. He just had to be there for it. But I'm just wondering, maybe that's the thing. You mentioned a giant that stands around and does nothing, and comedy bullshit wrestling. Maybe that somehow influenced Cody's mind. I don't know.
But that's the thing. Robocop, you explain his limitations. Still, he was advertised as being Sting's protector. Came out once to save Sting. The second time Sting's out there, Gigante comes out and just stands there. And one of the callers, it was a kid who called in. It's so funny. This kid was probably 11 years old. He goes, I don't understand. Sting did more physically than Robocop did. And Sting is supposed to be injured.
Well, besides that, see, the thing is, Robocop's shift ended. So he had
he's union. That's right.
Yeah. And then they told, when they told me that the whole gig was going to be the manager cage was gimmicked, for the Midnight Express versus Pillman and Zink, where we won the U.S. Tag Team title in the match that was originally designed to have gotten Brian Pillman over. They said, now, just whatever you do, don't pull on the bars of the cage because they're gimmicked. So they put me in a cage that I was not allowed to, on the side facing the ring, I was not allowed to be rough with the bars or they'd fall apart because they were gimmicked for the fucking Robocop. So I had to work shaking the cage.
You'll be happy to know some of the people who called into the show thought that the Midnight Express and Flying Brian and the Z-Man stole the show, although it's certainly petty theft. Whose idea was Paul Ellering versus Teddy Long, hair versus hair match? Two guys losing their hair.
That almost completely bald to begin with, right? I think Teddy Long, the only hair he had left, he looked like one of those fucking Orthodox Jewish people with the little fucking curls down on the sideburns. That's all the hair he had left, and Ellering had a crew cut. So I don't know.
Well, hear this episode today. Also news about the Road Warriors leaving the NWA, as well as some of the people coming to the NWA, like Stan Hansen and the Junkyard Dog. Hear it today. PWSpod.com. Are available wherever you find your favorite podcast. John Arezzi's Pro Wrestling Spotlight Then and Now.